Hotep family, and welcome once again to another edition of Community Cop. My name is Noel, leader, one of the co-founding members of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. I'm here today with my co-host, Michael Graves, aka Big Mike.
Namaste, brother.
And we'd like to welcome you and the viewing family to another edition. This is where truth and real talk occurs. We'd like to also remind you all that those of you who don't catch the program can watch it on YouTube. Just punch up Community Cop. We ask that you share, subscribe, and like the video once you view it, and share with your family members, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, as is customary, we like to go straight into our historical piece. On July 28th, 1917, there was a silent march in New York City protesting lynching, which was occurring throughout the nation. Michael, why don't you remind our viewing audience about this silent march?
Yeah, this silent march was very important, and the entire country was able to witness it. It was covered all over the world because well over 25,000 to 50,000 people marched through the streets of Manhattan, and it was intensely silent. It wasn't any remarks being made. It was meant to make a deafening sound with respect to the lynchings that was going on all over Black America. South, East, West, wherever you might be, Black, there were massacres going on. Consequently, W.B. Du Bois, as well as the NAACP, led this silent march, and other civil rights organizations, but primarily the NAACP and all those who were concerned led this march to protest the lynchings that was going on over and the lack of response by law enforcement, by governmental agencies that could have done something to help prevent these massacres that was going on. So ergo, you have a silent march, and this silent march was just felt all through the nation because in 1917, 1918, 1919, these were the red hot summers of those years. You had so many Black soldiers returning from World War I, and when they left and came back, they were a different person, because now to go overseas and fight for your country and to come back and have that same sort of treatment, Black soldiers weren't standing for it. Consequently, there were many lynchings that occurred to so-called put Black people back in their place, and there were massacres as a result of that. So this silent march was to actually bring out that governmental agencies, primarily law enforcement, police departments, sheriffs, marshals, whatever, as well as governors, sitting mayors, as well as the president itself, was not doing anything about that.
Right, and the most horrific point to be made as it relates to these lynchings, and when we talk about lynchings, you know, the family has to understand we're talking about murders, public murders. And we're not talking about from the extreme members of the white community. We're talking about your average white person, your doctor, your lawyer, your teacher, your husband, your preacher, your wife, your mother.
Preacher?
Preachers.
Did you say
preachers
preacher?
too. Yes, sir.
Okay.
White preachers often participated, not only participated, but encouraged their members to come and observe, you know, what was going on. And these lynchings not only were brutal, not only were they illegal and sadistic, but they oftentimes, as opposed to just murder an African-American or Black man, they would torture them for hours so that the crowd and the participants could get the full enjoyment of watching this individual suffer for a very long period of time. They used to cut their ears off, cut their sexual organs off. They used to cut their arms off, their fingers off, and they used to bring these home as trophies. So this was the sickness, the utter sickness of white America. As I stated, this was your average white American citizen who participated, who encouraged, and who enjoyed these lynchings. And there was no protection. There was no repercussions. Many of these individuals bragged about their participation. They made postcards showing themselves next to the body, showing themselves or holding up body parts and sending it to family members. So there was no fear of retaliation, judicial retaliation, because the whole white America, if they didn't participate in it, they supported it and endorsed it, and at best just turned their heads as these horrific lynchings took place. So big kudos to this particular march, which African Americans felt so compelled to respond as opposed to just stand aside and allow our people to be butchered ad nauseum throughout the streets and communities of America.
Excellent point, brother.
Okay, so something that very much related to these horrific, diabolical lynchings was the fact that there was also many race massacres throughout the nation, where once again, the participants of these particular race murders and massacres, they were your average white citizen. They weren't the extreme criminal element of white America. This was your traditional mom and pop who participated in these massacres of African Americans. And we have to understand, we're talking about men, women, and children. And this went on throughout the nation. But Michael, you want to talk about a couple of massacres, one in particular that happened on July 30th, 1866.
Yes, now, you know, truth be told, Noel, we could talk about massacres every week. And it, you know, and it wouldn't be extraordinary. It wouldn't be anything revelatory because they've always occurred. But I'm only mentioning these because they happen all in this week. Now, that one happened on July 30th. There was also two others. The one that happened 7/27/1919 in Chicago. Yes, Chicago. We're not always talking about the South. This one was in New Orleans, but the one in Chicago, that's not the South. And then the one in Slocum, Texas, that's not the South either. So my point is that here you had Black men in this so-called hot summer, the red summer of 1917, and it went on in 18 and 19, where you actually had 3 years in a row, every summer, ad nauseum, you had Black men being killed all over. And these were massacres, not the individual lynchings you were talking about just now, Noel. We're talking about massacres. And, you know, anything from 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, or hundreds were killed at these times. And these were, as you pointed out, your average white citizenry, where they would come out with their shotguns, organized, and they weren't all KKK members, but they were KKK thinkers, you know, the mindset, you know, they embraced that mentality, and they will go out at the slightest rumor of a Black man dating a white woman, or a Black man getting a job that a white person should have gotten. So you take your pick. These fishtails went from one thing in the morning, and by that evening, whites were all out in the street killing Black people left and right, and sheriffs, marshals, police agencies all stood by, and some participated. And after they killed the people, oftentimes they took property, they confiscated businesses, took over land, what have you, in these massacres. And these things are part of the American experience.
Right. And when they talk about critical race theory, you know, they coined that these are the kind of incidents that many white Americans, you know, are calling for amnesia. They want us to forget this period as if it never happened. And, you know, the horrific history, the sickness, the disease of America that continues up until today, this racial hatred, especially and in particular for African Americans. And mind you, white Americans enslaved our ancestors. They brought us over here under the most hostile and demonic conditions. They enslaved us for over 400 years. They murdered, tortured, raped our women, broke up families, denied us of a future of hope, denied us of our culture, our ancestry, our language. And they have the gall and the audacity to continue to hate us. Now, one would assume that if everything was right and exact, that the level of hatred white Americans have manifested towards or against African Americans, that we would hate them equally, if not more, for the crimes that they committed against our people, not only for a decade, but for centuries. But this is a disease of America, the sickness of America. And as you stated, Michael, the American history is replete with these horrific massacres where white average citizens, in conjunction with district attorneys and prosecutors and police and governors and politicians who stood by and did nothing, would organize themselves just to kill your average African-American citizen, just to murder them for a variety of reasons. And sometimes they just made up reasons. You know, we talked about in this program at a time when Blacks were very successful after Reconstruction and electing politicians and electing ministers. You know, whites just got so upset over the success of African Americans that they just went on one of these killing frenzies. So, Mike, we thank you for once again bringing up this particular massacre of 1866, and we want our community and our viewers to understand that, you know, Wall Street massacre was not the only massacre that occurred in the United States. American history, American whites have a vast history of outright murdering African Americans by the hundreds, and then they went home, hugged their wives, kissed their kids, and ate dinner. You know, right after these horrific massacres. This is the disease, the DNA of America.
That's right.
Any closing remarks on this?
No, I'd say you're on point, and I'm so glad that you mentioned a group that's very rarely mentioned when you said preachers, because you're talking about pastors, leaders of men, women, and children, and for them to be out there in the woods or in the backyard somewhere with their congregation, you could see they still got on their Sunday best clothes. They don't have on overalls and jeans and all that stuff. So you could see oftentimes it was right after church where they all dressed in good attire and they're all taking pictures. And as you said, sending postcards to their relatives in different parts of the country. So the proof was in the postcards, and the postcards should get everybody they indicted. But unfortunately, that didn't happen because the prosecutor might have been there, the DA himself.
And as you stated, Michael, when you talk about you know, these pictures, many times these fathers, white men, brought their white children, they brought their white wives, and they stood next to the body, smiling and grinning, and were happy. Oh, there's never been in a time, you know, in history time, the sickness, the utter diabolical nature, the utter void of any righteousness, any purity, any virtue in Americans that participated in these horrific acts, you know, over and over and over again. Like I said, American history is replete with these incidents. It happened more than it didn't happen. It happened a longer period of time in this country that it didn't happen. You know, murder, bloodthirstiness, savagery is in the DNA of an American, and this is something that most white Americans throughout the country are calling for an eraser of these incidents, and you know, calling for amnesia. But you know, thank you, Michael. You know, it just gets my blood boiling. Those of you who want to see some of these pictures, you can look up over the internet Without Sanctuary, where a lot of these horrific acts are captured. You know, that we discussed earlier. All right, we want to fast forward, and we talk about Black Lives Matter. That particular past history is one of the reasons why we say that Black Lives Matter, because it didn't matter in this country. And we're not talking about the organization Black Lives Matter. We're talking about the concept. But Michael, recently in Boston, in Jacoby, Massachusetts, a police commissioner had rehired a police officer who had resigned after he was caught stating some racist comments over the internet. Remind our viewing audience about this.
Yeah, Michael Wilk. Police officer Michael Wilk had to resign after making negative statements on his social media page. Now, what he did was, I'll give you an example of some of the things he did. He talked about, here he's in Massachusetts, but he's talking about the NYPD police officers should shoot looters in New York City. And he talked about, he posted an image of immigrants getting cut by razor wires while they were crossing the borders. And he liked the fact that they were getting cut by razor wire. He also talked about Colin Kaepernick kneeling and then comparing that to Derek Chauvin, who kneeled on George Floyd's neck. So I guess he somehow, in his distorted mind, found a way to equate the two, one kneeling at a football game and saying, so Chauvin had the right to kneel on someone's neck. This is how sick he is. And like I said, he's encouraging police officers like himself to kill anytime the opportunity is there, Black people. So after he posted all these things, the mayor steps in, and the mayor's name is John Vayu. Mayor John Vayu allowed him to resign a year ago. Now, this was a year ago in June. Now, this past June and July, he has rehired him. Now, believe it or not, a year ago, the person who's saying all these things was the spokesperson for the Chicopee Police Department. A spokesperson carrying these views, Noel, because you're supposed to reflect the department when you speak. But this was his views, and he was allowed to resign, something you've always railed against, allowing police officers that engage in police brutality and criminality to resign instead of being fired. So since he wasn't fired, the mayor is making an excuse now saying, well, he wasn't fired, he resigned, so I'm bringing him back, but he's no longer the spokesperson for the department. Your thoughts?
I'm outraged, but this is a manifestation of the hostility that starts from the top. You can't get me, you cannot convince me that before this officer resigned, that there was an agreement. Listen, resign right now. Once this dies down, you're going to be rehired. That's point number one. Number two, as you stated, commissioners and mayors, you have the opportunity, and employers, you have the opportunity and the authority to reject the resignation and say, no, you're not resigning, you're fired. And that's what they do. When somebody does something in strict violation of the code and ethics of a police department, that what we're talking about now, they deserve to be terminated. And many of our viewers understand that because of the awesome authority that police officers have, because they're public servants, not of a particular community, but the entire public, they swear, they take an oath. And there's certain mindsets that they're prohibited from manifesting. And a racist, outrageous, hateful mindset is one of them. So the goal for the mayor or the police commissioner to accept this individual back into their department, they have the authority to, even if he reapplied, to reject his application, to say, no, you're not worthy of being a public servant, a police officer. I think the Boston Citizen Street should be outraged that this person who once manifested such a racist and hateful mentality is now once again going to be walking around their city with a weapon and the authority and the power to make arrests, to stop. So it's just an outrage that this decision was made. And as I stated, I believe when he did resign that there was some backdoor conversation either with him or his union representative saying, listen, tell him to stand low for a year. After this dies down, we'll bring him back. No way in the world he should have been rehired.
I concur that I think an agreement was made, even though his time probably was in. They said, look, just cool out for a year and we'll bring you back. The FBI has done serious studies on Black folks and have come to the conclusion that we're an emotional people. We are not analytical, we are emotional, and that's why they deny us justice, because they say if you wait long enough, the emotions will cool down. And once they cool down, you can bring them back. So this is why understanding the rhythm, the soulful nature, the God spirit in Black people, we can be mad but so long, and they understand that. So they realize, and I agree with you, that a deal was cut with him to say, look, just go home for a year and we'll bring you back. You can't stay right now because it's making all of us look bad, and you was our spokesperson. So we'll get you back. So that's why the mayor justified the move by saying he's no longer the spokesperson, but he's on the job. But he's more dangerous on patrol than he is as a spokesperson.
Facts. And, not only do they study our community and understand that the initial anger that we might have manifested when this first came out perhaps would die down after a year, but they also know the mentality of the white community that there'd be no objection for bringing such an individual back.
Yes, sir. Good point.
They also know that white people can care less that he manifested some mentality, racist, hateful mentality, that he doesn't deserve to be a law enforcement officer. Imagine if one of their officers was a member of the Nation of Islam and he spewed, if that's individual or Black Panther Party, and he spewed anti-white statements and racist statements against whites. Imagine the anger that the white community would manifest if he was brought back, to patrol their streets. So it's a twofold. They understand that many times the anger amongst our people will dwindle after time, and they also understand that there will be no anger from the white community, so-called good white folks. I'm not talking about your extremists. I'm not talking about your members of these extremist groups. I'm talking about the so-called good white people. There will be no anger. There will be no brushback. There will be no retaliation politically for bringing such an individual back. Because as we keep in with the theme of this program, white America has a sickness, continue to have a sickness that started the first day the first white man stepped his foot in North America, is racial hatred, animosity against members of the Black community and indigenous population, and it continues up until today, and it manifests itself over and over and over again in some of the stories that we even cover.
And I agree with you so much, especially when you mention so-called good white folks, or you ask for, where's that so-called white liberal, who's supposed to be fair-minded? I don't care whether you consider yourself conservative, liberal, whatever you might be. Any man that compares Colin Kaepernick kneeling to George Chauvin kneeling on someone's neck, a human being's life being taken from them from kneeling, and justifying somehow equating the two, it just shows how sick you are. And that mayor, who I'm sure fully understands the difference in the two kneelings, should make sure that man never has a job in his city.
Right, as a police officer. All right. We want to talk about another police incident in Nashville, Tennessee. Some of you may remember in Jacksonville in 2018, Officer Andrew shot and killed the brother Daniel Hambrick by shooting him in the back 3 times as he was running away from him. Of course, a lying officer claimed that when Daniels was running away from him, that he gave him what's called a targeted glance. It's something I never heard of before. The targeted glance is supposed to be someone trying to get an idea of where to shoot. Now, allegedly, the officer is saying that brother Daniels had a weapon.
Yes.
But of course, as he was running away from the officer, he's probably 10 yards. The white officer didn't know that there was a home video nearby capturing the entire event. As Officer Andrew was pursuing Brother Hambrick, who was extending his lead away from him. Mind you, he's running away from him. His back is turned. The Supreme Court already said that you cannot you cannot shoot a fleeing felon in the back. As Brother Hambrick was running away from the officer, not turning around, running away, Officer Andrew took out his weapon, slowly aimed it, and shot at him 3 times. Now, some suggest, as I stated, that the officers claim that he gave him a targeted glance. Like he looked over his shoulder real quick, and he said that he identified that glance as Brother Hambrick getting ready to turn around and fire on him, which is nonsense. If you look at the video, police officers who feel that there's a threat will take cover. There was trees, there was cars, there was houses in the area that if the white officer really felt that there were a threat, he would have took cover and perhaps still pointed his weapon at his target, but he didn't even take cover. He was in the wide open as a brother was running away from him, extending his distance between him and the officer, not even looking back. The officer aimed his weapon, pulled up as if he was in a shooting range. And those of you who can look at my Facebook page, you can see the videos on there, or you can punch it up. It's in Nashville, Tennessee. Officer Andrew shooting Daniel Hambrick. The officer at ease, as if he's in the range. No threat, no taking cover, and he fired 3 times. Well, he was originally charged with first-degree murder, but unfortunately, on July 2nd of this year, the district attorney made a deal with the defense counsel and offered him a manslaughter charge. He was sentenced to only 3 years, So it went from a sentence where he could possibly receive 25 years of life to where the district attorney made a deal with him and he only received a 3-year sentence. His mother, who's a courageous African queen, she wasn't one of those mother who accepted this verdict, who said she forgive him. She said she doesn't. She was angry at the judge. She was angry at the prosecutor. She was still angry at the officer for murdering her son. But this is another outrage. A white police officer murders a brother on video, and the most he receives is a 3-year prison sentence. And this, as I stated, this is the theme of America. Mike, I know you're familiar with this particular story. What are your comments on it?
Yeah, I remember watching the video. And by the way, he would not have gotten convicted at all. As a matter of fact, it might not have even gone to a grand jury if it wasn't for the video. The police officer actually ran a few steps after him.
Right.
They were both running. And as the space between them widened from 10, 15, maybe close to 20 feet, that's when the police officer stopped. Like he was saying to himself, I'm not running after him anymore.
Right.
And just actually stopped. And in a calculated fashion, just aimed his weapon at the target. Now, what I know what you're talking about when you're talking about that little instant where Hambrick looked over his shoulder.
Well, that's what the officer said. That's the officer said. I didn't even see that.
Yeah. Well, that's what he said.
Right.
Now, let's just say worst case scenario, he did glance back. The police officer's claiming that he thought that Hambrick was aiming a weapon at him. He didn't turn and stop.
Facts.
The most that could have happened is that his neck turned in a way where the police officer is claiming that somehow he stopped and took aim. And that's why he claims he fired his weapon. He did not know about that video when he gave those statements. So the only thing that saved, at least caused charges to be filed and a conviction is only because the video footage. If not for the video footage, we would never have heard about Brother Hambrick. Never, not at all.
Exactly. And as I stated, the officer claimed when he said that when Brother Daniels turned around, they coined his turning around as a targeted glance, meaning that he was sizing him up like he was about to shoot him. That's such an outrage,
Well,
yeah, go ahead, brother.
That's a wordsmith in action.
Facts.
Targeted glance. So now, because I mean, you know the old thing. If you stand up, you wrong. If you sit down, you wrong. If you lay down, you wrong. Because you're gonna get that bullet. You're gonna get that hot bullet regardless. Whether you laying down, sitting down, standing up. If you standing up, you're in a military position. If you laying down, you took aim. If you sitting down, you getting ready to pull out. So it doesn't matter what you do. If the guy want to shoot you, he gonna shoot.
But when you look at the law and you look at the video, it's an outrage that this man will do less than 20 months in jail for committing murder. So
basically you're saying all he did was lose his job, basically.
Basically, right. When you add it up. And, that's a sympathetic prosecutor because, prosecutors, when they have complete evidence against you, they don't have to make you a deal like this.
Right.
Or definitely not a 3-year deal, and then sometimes they may say, listen, we want to save the family from going through a traumatic trial. So, they have a conference with the family, they speak to the family. If everybody agrees, they'll say, okay, accept the 20-year sentence. So we'll skip going through the horrible details. But the family was like, no, reject this. They requested the judge to reject this deal. The district attorney who's supposed to be working on the behalf of the family and the victim ignored the family's plea. The family said, listen, go to trial. We don't care if you think you may not win. There's a video. We don't want this deal. But the district attorney, a white district attorney, because they always hold sympathy. And as we talked about this theme in History Past with the massacres and the lynchings, there's a consistency, a historical consistency in America where white district attorneys do not act on behalf of Black victims, especially when you're talking about white mobs, white vigilante, white police officers. A lot of times they buddy up with their ethnic counterpart and show little sympathy for Black victims. So this district attorney ignored the pleas of the family, ignored the pleas, of the victim, in this case, who had died, and sided with the police officer and gave him an out, allowed him to plead guilty to manslaughter when he should have been convicted for what he was charged with, was his first-degree murder. So another outrage. And then we see this happen many times throughout the nation where police officers on video who are caught murdering African Americans get these ridiculous life sentences.
Right.
All right, before we go into a couple other stories, Michael, I want to go back to something that happened last week. Fortunately, some of you probably caught the program with Michael and the Irritated Genie, where they did an excellent program about the coronavirus vaccine. It was mentioned recently, I think yesterday, in New York City, the New York City mayor is forcing workers in New York to get vaccinated between August and September, or else they have to be tested, or else they have to lose their jobs. Now, many of these workers, these employees, are of course African-American, and of course, many of these workers, Michael, the funny thing about it is less than 2 weeks ago, he threw a parade for many of the first responders. He threw a parade for those individuals who, through the pandemic, many of them were understaffed. They didn't have the protections that they deserved because the city didn't provide masks early on, but they prevailed. They saved the city, they saved lives. We're talking about your nurses, we're talking about your healthcare workers, we're talking about people who work in shelters, we're talking about people that work in senior citizens. Now the mayor, after giving them a parade and honoring them, is telling them, listen, those of you, for whatever reason, have problems with getting the vaccine, if you don't get vaccinated, you can kiss your job goodbye. Talk about the tale of two mentalities. The forced individuals who have legitimate concerns about the long-term negative effects of these vaccines. As we know, people who are getting vaccinated, and many of you may not hear some of these stories, are dying all over the country, even though the percentage may be small. You never hear about the people who have a negative, horrific reaction to the vaccine. So there's a lot of people who have some legitimate concerns, who believe in protecting themselves by wearing masks or wearing double masks. But Michael, what is your position on the mayor's new decision? It's happening not only in New York, but I think this is going to happen. I think this is going to be the new norm. He's also not only forcing city workers, but he's encouraging all public or private employees to mandate this for their employees as well. In other words, if you don't get vaccinated, you can't work.
Well, I didn't see anywhere in the New York City charter where it says that a mayor has that power to make you take any type of injection. Now, it is one thing to protect children and say children have to continue wearing masks, even though the deaths is not reflected in certainly early childhood, the elementary school, junior high school, the numbers are not there, but I could see you being cautious when it comes to children. But to mandate that adults take this, well, I don't want to call it the vaccine, but just for these purposes, the so-called vaccine.
Right.
He knows that if it was a court case, he wouldn't have a leg to stand on. He knows full well that you can't tell the Jewish community to do anything. He knows that full well that during the pandemic, yeshivas all over violated what the basic protocols were, these general understandings that people had. He knows full well that they went on with business as usual. So he's not going to fire them. I can say that with a surety. that he's not going to fire members of the Jewish community, irrespective of what jobs for the city they might have. That's not gonna happen. Now, he might try to bulldoze and mess with some Black folks, but he's not gonna do that to the Jewish community. So, and he doesn't have a legal right to stand on if it became a court case, because the courts have avoided any mandates right now. And corporate America would love them to do that, but they're not doing it because they know that's violating your constitutional rights as a citizen. So he knows that full well. So if it was to happen, it will not be legal, and it will be challenged in court. That's for sure.
Well, it's interesting to see many of these public workers are unionized. It will be interesting to see if the union supports, whether or not they believe in the so-called vaccine or not. It'll be interesting to see if they will support their workers, as I stated, who were heralded and honored like about 2-3 weeks ago with a parade, down in New York. And as I look at and listen to the commentary on fake news, some of you, of course, most of us object to some of the positions that Donald Trump had. But one of the things that he was totally correct about is CNN is definitely fake news. If you look at these fake news channels who are beating the drums, who are causing intentionally division between the American public, between those who have been vaccinated and those who haven't, they're drawing a line in the sand and acting as if those who, for whatever reason, have a legitimate concern about the so-called vaccine, they're trying to dismiss it as just false information. In less than 6 months that they initiated this vaccine, I mean, we had blood clots from not only J&J, but the other 2 vaccines as well. We have instances where they discovered it's enlarged in some young men's heart. There's a large heart syndrome that some young people are getting who have taken the vaccine. And then recently they're talking about there's a nervous condition. I don't have the name of it, but you can look it up, that this vaccine, that those who have been vaccinated are starting to experience. And this is less than 6 months that they initiated, this going out there, so who knows what other long-term health issues there may be. But those who have legitimate concerns, and they're trying to dismiss it as, you're following rumors, false information. They never talk about whether or not, why was this vaccine authorized? It received emergency clearance. They're never talking about what information do we have regarding long-term negative effects, if there are any. They don't know, because this is a new vaccine never used before. So individuals have those legitimate concerns should be respected as well. And so CNN News and politicians and spokespersons, they come out and act as if people are just buying into just crazy false information, rumors, and innuendos, as opposed to dealing with the legitimate concerns that many have with this so-called vaccine.
Well, I would say that if you look at the video that Jeannie made, and I'm not talking about his participation on Community Cop, he has a video, COVID-19, and hopefully at the end of this program, we'll show you the website if you want to have it streamed to you, or if you want a hard copy, by the irritated genie Ayo Kamanthi. If you look at this objectively, he will give you so much information that you're not hearing on those TV stations that are giving you misinformation. These are facts that happen. You see people shaking. You see people who were healthy faint right after they took it, while they were talking about, I just took the vaccine, and then a nurse passes out. She's feeling faint, she's feeling her head, then she passes out right there. You can look and see what happened to Midwin Charles, a Black, beautiful sister, who's a lawyer from Brooklyn. You'll see what happened to Hank Aaron, one of the greatest baseball players that ever lived, and just a great human being. See what happened to him. See what happened to Marvelous Marvin Hagler. It's just so many people, you can just see what happened to them after they took it. So it's just, it is an imbalance to just say this is a pure vaccine, because a vaccine is supposed to have at least the dead particles of the disease in it, which makes your immune system alerted. So when it sees it again, it will be able to fight it. But so it's not really a vaccine. And as you pointed out, Noel, they did not give it the time to go through the rigorous trials that you're supposed to. If you see the Irritated Genies video, you see them trying it on, whether it's cats, dogs, monkeys, macaques, and you see what happened to them. But get that video, and that is honest and forthright, and you'll see Senator Rand Paul and so many others that are challenging Fauci, and you'll see the history of Fauci. And will be made more intelligent and more informed. Whether you made the decision already to take the vaccine or not, you will at least have the information for the future, right, whether it's for a booster shot, or whether the next time someone asks you, a family member or friend asks you about it, you'll have better information.
And what I'm most concerned about, as I listen to the dialogue, is that it's one-sided. They act as if it's not two sides to the story, that there's not some scientific concern in the minds of some people that may be legitimate. They just totally dismissive and totally forcing everyone to think one way about this particular so-called vaccine. But let's move on to another story, Michael. The Olympics, everyone may know now that the Olympics are on the way, happen in Japan. And a particular interesting story happened, Michael, between the sister, Aliyah Shipman. She's the U.S. Olympic Committee, for whatever reason, is not allowing Sister Shipman to compete in a Taekwondo match. Why don't you make our family alert to this story?
Now, she is from Florida, and for years, her early years growing up, she fought in major tournaments all throughout the U.S. and represented the U.S. and won medals over the years. For the last 2 years, she has been representing Haiti, which is legal. Her grandfather's Haitian, her, on down to herself. So she has decided to fight for Haiti. For the last 2 years, it has not been a problem. She has won medals up to 16 years old for America. For the last 2 years, she has been fighting for Haiti. Now that she's made the finals, where she's gonna be actually competing for Haiti against America and other countries, now they're trying to block it. They don't have a legal leg to stand on, but they're trying to block it, and they know she doesn't have time because it starts this Friday. So she has very little legal time. She's taking it to court, but that's not giving her much room to get in the tournament, because they know she's an excellent fighter and that she will win for Haiti, so they're trying to block her.
Now, Michael, we know that there's other athletes who have family background in other nations, and they choose to, our sister who's
America.
Right. So now, what is the U.S. Olympic Committee? What is a reasoning behind stating trying to stop her from fighting?
Well, I'm glad you pointed that out, because what they're in fact doing, they have recruited people from all over the world that became American citizens and now are going against the countries of their birth. Right. In her particular case, they're just stating that it's illegal, and they're just blocking the Olympic Committee is blocking it, knowing full well she does not have time, because they just blocked her, and she has very little time before Friday, where the tournament begins. So she's giving it a try. She's in court with it right now. Hopefully she'll be successful. And America should not be vindictive, because it has athletes from all over the world. It took scientists from Germany in World War II to develop the A-bomb. They have taken some of the best minds from all over. There was a brain drain in Africa to get its best, a brain drain in the Caribbean to get its best, over here to represent corporations and the technology. So they should not use their power and influence to block the Olympic Committee in allowing her to fight for Haiti. They should, and right now as we speak, it's not only her, they're harassing Haiti over allowing her to fight representing Haiti.
Right. Okay, before we move on to our next story, you know, there's always been a particular level of intervention, negative intervention by this country as it relates to Haiti. And perhaps one day we can even talk about the assassination of their president. Hopefully the sister gets the opportunity to participate. This is supposed to be a positive, friendly, international locking arms event. So it's kind of outrageous that they're forcing this as opposed to concentrating on her craft, which is Taekwondo, to be worried about, fighting some court, fighting in court to have an ability to participate. Michael, there was those of us who remember the insurrection that occurred at the White House, at the Capitol building, I'm sorry. Well, we know that there's a number of individuals that have been arrested. One individual in particular is the first one to get convicted and receive a sentence. He received 8 months. I think his name is Paul Hoskins. Recently received 8 months as a result of his participation in the invasion of the Capitol building. Why don't you further elaborate, Mike?
Yes, U.S. District Judge Randolph Mass sentenced Paul Hodgkins to 8 months. Now, these 8 months is just after, first of all, let me just say something about the prosecution. The prosecution only asked for an additional 7 to 13 months. So in other words, they really roughly just wanted 2 years. And this is ridiculous for an insurrection. The lawyer for Hodgkins asked for no jail time. So the judge reduced it to 8 months. Now, think about it. The charge was obstruction of a joint session of Congress. Mm-hmm. That sounds fine on the surface. In other words, Noel, if you was at the meeting where Congress was holding court and you started shouting, you're interrupting the meeting.
Right.
You're gonna get convicted of a felony. That's a felony, mm-hmm. to interrupt Congress while they're in session.
Right.
After several warnings, you're probably gonna get arrested by the Capitol Police, and then you're going to be sentenced for interrupting their session. Mm-hmm. This person did more than interrupt the session. Right. This was a coup attempt. He's an insurrectionist terrorist. This was terrorism to stop the count of United States citizens in deciding on who the next president of America was going to be. This was stopping the tally of the entire nation. So this was a coup attempt. This person had on a ballistic vest, a zip tie, zip tie restraints. It's actually plastic handcuffs, or you call them flex cuffs. He had all of that on. Now, when he was asked in court, what were you doing if you wasn't trying to imprison someone, take somebody captive? What were you doing with those flexi cuffs? Do you know what his response was? He found them on the floor, and he was looking for a police officer to give them to. Now, he wore them on his vest.
Right.
That you know that straps on your chest, he wore them on that. But when asked in court, he said he found them on the floor and he was looking for a police officer to hand them to. Mm-hmm. Well, what about all them police officers that they ran by and pushed out of the way in gaining entrance to the Capitol building? Okay. Not only that, but how can this judge be lenient with a group that killed a police officer?
Thanks.
Now, let's look at this. Let's look at this. A Texas judge let go a colonel in the Air Force who was participating in this and had on all that helmet and all that stuff, had all that on. The same thing. The judge let him go saying that his apology was sincere.
That's right.
So before his trial, he was allowed to stay at home because of that. Now, this guy, Hodgkins, is under what you call, I don't know if you ever heard the term, self-surrender. Mm-hmm. So they didn't lock him up on the spot, even though he was sentenced.
Right.
So he is allowed to self-surrender to the Federal Bureau of Prisons at his convenience. So after he was sentenced that night, he was able to go home. The same way a Texas judge sent a colonel in the Air Force, let him go home when he was arrested until trial started. So this is showing you, and the reason why I'm pointing out the prosecution didn't ask so much time is because they winking at each other. They are not taking this serious. Now, let me just say, a police officer was killed. I know I'm repeating myself, Noel, but this is not a lightweight thing. A police officer was killed at the Capitol building.
Right.
Another police officer, if you watch the video, you won't believe it. A police officer was dragged out from the door into a crowd.
That's right.
You heard people saying, kill him.
That's right.
Kill him. When he heard them saying, kill him, he started begging for his life. Right. He said, please don't kill me. They took his gun. He said, please don't kill me. I got children.
Right.
He said, please, I got children at home. Don't kill me. Because people were saying, kill him, kill him.
That's right.
They took his gun. Now, the other part to this is, and I know this is so foreign to you, Noel, but just picture this. The cops on the other side of the door watched them drag a police officer into a crowd and did not act.
That's right.
Now, any police officer, any police department on this planet will come out that door and start dropping people.
That's right. That's what you got your weapon for.
Once you take that man's gun, they not gonna wait and see what you gonna do. They coming out firing.
That's right.
To protect that police officer's life. They stood there and just looked. Why? Because those was Trump's people.
Those white people.
And they understood it. They said, this is the president's people looking at going on the president's commands to storm this building. So I can't go out there, even though that's my guy, that's my dude. I can't go out there. This is my fellow police officer. I can't shoot Trump's people. They're all white.
That's
yeah,
right.
They beat them down.
That's
yeah,
right.
Another police officer who they caught in the door, almost squeezed his life, destroyed his vertebrae. He can't work as a police officer no more. His spinal cord is destroyed. They saw all that and would not shoot.
Right.
That shows you that with all this sickness going on, they allow a police officer to be dragged into a crowd in plain sight. It was light outside. They dragged him out there. They took his gun from him. They were spraying, bear spraying all that stuff in his eyes. He was pleading for his life. And the police officers on the other side of the door, they watched. They didn't come out with guns drawn and say, get away from him. Nobody fired. They didn't even come out the door. And this police officer was reduced to begging for his life, saying, please don't kill me. I got kids. I got kids at home. Your thought?
Well, Michael, and we have to close down. I believe time is running out, but for a fact, there is no way in the world that if I see my partner dragged by a hostile, angry, threatening crowd who have assaulted hundreds of officers. One particular officer, I believe he lost an eye.
Yes.
Other officers was severely injured. So when you talk about the insurrection, when you talk about disrupting a congressional session, this is going way beyond that. By some of the instances that you mentioned, some of the details that you gave, this is way beyond just simply obstructing Congress. They were assaulting police officers, attempting to murder police officers, trying to murder police officers. And there's no way in the world, if I have a weapon on me and my partner is dragged into the center of a hostile crowd like that I'm not blasting. There's no way in the world they're going to allow me to retreat and allow him to be out there, and we keep our fingers crossed, hoping that they won't kill him. That's unimaginable to me. I would have went out there, and I have a weapon for a reason. They were using deadly physical force. They were using such a high level of force against the police officers. As you stated, there were deaths that occurred that particular day. So all bets are off, at that particular point. So it's only a reflection. We understand that this would have been a group doing the same thing, but the only thing you have to change, don't change none of the activity, don't change none of the things that were mentioned. The only thing you change is this color of the skin of the participants. It would have been a vastly different response by law enforcement, and we all know that, as well as now the prosecutor and the judge, and only giving this first individual sentence 8 months. But, closing comment, Michael, because we're now last few minutes.
Yeah, we're down to probably about 2 minutes. So I'll just, in closing, Black man, Black woman, protect the Black child, accept your own, and be yourself.
Right. And on behalf of Community Cop, Nat Woods, Sheila Berry, Veronica Kitt, Big D, we'd like to thank our producer and engineer for the phenomenal job that they do. Julian Harper, we love you. Little Mo, Kitty Cat, I love you. And family, when you ask, what is the response to all of the stuff that we spoke about? In my judgment, there's not that many response. The first, as you heard me say on numerous occasions, Kwame Ture said our community is not poor, we're just poorly organized. Secondly, the only philosophy that we need to adopt, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, is the one of Marcus Garvey and the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. We have to come amongst ourselves. We understand what this country is doing to us, has done to us, will continue to do to us. We have to come together as a people and foment our own, avenues of liberation, including economics, education, politics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the only solution. Organized people. We'd like to thank you for viewing our program. We see you next Tuesday. Tell a foe, tell a friend about Community Cop. Anything else, Michael?
No, that's it, brother.
Okay, see you next weekend. Okay, peace.